Have you ever looked at huge global problems like poverty or bad healthcare and just wondered, how do we even begin to fix that? Well, it turns out there's a kind of playbook for it, a set of core ideas and key players that shape pretty much every effort to make things better. In this explainer, we're going to crack open that playbook and give you a simple framework to understand how we try to change the world.
I mean, when you're staring down challenges this massive, the big question isn't just what to do, but how you even get started. This is where the whole idea of development comes in. Think of it like a map for a really, really complicated journey. And we're about to break down the two most important parts of that map.
Okay, so at the heart of literally any development project, it really boils down to two things, the approach and the strategy. The approach is basically the why. It's the big idea, the core philosophy driving everything. And the strategy, that's the who, the actual people or groups on the ground making it happen. If you can understand this pairing, you've pretty much cracked the code for how these huge projects are put together. So first, let's open up the toolkit and take a look at the why. Over the years, there have been 5 major philosophies or approaches that have really shaped how we think about development. Each one gives us a totally different way of looking at the problem. First up, we've got the community development approach. The idea here is simple, but it's really powerful. Local people know their problems best, so they should be the ones to lead the solution. This creates this incredible sense of ownership, right? I mean, if you help build your own community, well, you're definitely going to make sure it keeps working. But here's the catch. What happens if the community just doesn't have the money, or the engineering skills, or the right leadership to get a big project off the ground? Then you have the basic needs approach. This one is all about priorities. It argues that you can't really talk about long-term economic plans if people are hungry or don't have a roof over their heads. So job number 1 is to get the absolute essentials, food, water, shelter, medicine, directly to the people who need them most. It's a direct attack on the symptoms of poverty. The critique, though, is that it can sometimes be a bit of a band-aid, It treats the symptom, but maybe not the deeper economic issue that caused it. Next is the integrated rural development approach. This is the let's fix everything at once method. It's smart because it recognizes that all these problems are connected. Poor health is tied to dirty water, which is tied to bad infrastructure. So the idea is, why not tackle farming, health, education, and roads all at the same time? It's holistic for sure, but as you can imagine, it is incredibly expensive and honestly a logistical nightmare to coordinate. Now this next one, this one changes the entire conversation. The rights-based approach says, wait a minute. Food, education, and healthcare, these aren't charity. They're fundamental human rights, and that is a huge power shift. All of a sudden, it's not about being a grateful recipient of aid, it's about being a citizen who can hold their government accountable. The focus shifts to fairness, justice, and protecting the most vulnerable people in society. And our final tool in the kit is the rural livelihood approach. This one is super practical. It just asks a simple question. How do people in rural areas actually make a living and get by? It looks at everything a family has to work with, their skills, their land, their savings, even their social connections, and tries to figure out how to make those things stronger. It's all about building on what people already have to create a more stable life. All right, so we've got our whys, that's our toolkit of philosophies. But now we have to talk about the who. Who are the actual players on the field putting these ideas into action? This is where strategy comes in. Generally speaking, these strategies fall into 2 big camps, top-down and bottom-up. A top-down strategy is when the big players, like the central government or major corporations, are leading the charge from the national level. Bottom-up is the exact opposite. It's when the action starts at the grassroots, driven by local communities and the smaller organizations that support them. And even within that top-down camp, you've got 2 main rivals. In one corner, you have the state-led strategy. This is where the government is in the driver's seat, funding huge national projects like highways and power grids, all with the goal of spreading resources out fairly. And in the other corner, you have the market-led strategy, which says let the private sector take the wheel. The belief is that competition and innovation will naturally create the most efficient path to growth. Okay, now let's flip to the bottom-up teams, the folks on the ground. In an NGO-led strategy, you have non-governmental organizations acting as partners or guides for a community. They're usually really flexible and can bring in specific expertise. But in a true community-led strategy, the community is the boss. This is the ultimate form of participation, where local people are planning, managing, and owning their projects from start to finish. So we've got our approaches, the why, and our strategies, the who. But this is all a bit theoretical, right? Let's make it real. We're going to ground all of this in a fascinating case study from Nepal.
Nepal's story is the perfect example of how these ideas change over time. Before the 1950s, there wasn't much organized development at all. Then, after 1950, the country went all in on a classic top-down, state-led strategy with big national 5-year plans. But after 1990, with the return of democracy, the pendulum swung hard in the other direction, towards decentralization and a bottom-up focus on people's participation.
And that big shift after 1990, that move toward trusting local people, well, it gave birth to one of the most celebrated development success stories in the entire world, Nepal's community forestry program. This program is the perfect real-world mashup of our framework. The government basically handed over control of local forests to the community groups living there. Think about it. That's a community development approach, that's the philosophy, teamed up with a community-led strategy, that's who's doing it. And the results? They were just astounding. Forests started to grow back, communities earned real income from selling timber and herbs, and local democracy actually got stronger. It was a huge win. Of course, Nepal isn't the only place with amazing ideas. The solutions to these problems are as diverse as the places themselves. So let's take a quick fire tour of some other successful ideas from the region. Just look at the variety here. Bangladesh pioneered microcredit, which is a classic rural livelihood approach, focusing on financial tools. Bhutan used very top-down, state-led strategy to build massive hydropower dams. India had huge success with agricultural co-ops, which is a form of community development. And China is trying to blend a market-led strategy with environmental goals. The key lesson from all this? There is no single magic bullet. And that brings us to the most important point of this entire explainer. After looking at all these different philosophies and all these different players, what is the one thing you absolutely need to remember? It really is this simple. Success is never about finding the one best approach or the one right strategy in a textbook. Nope. It's about being a savvy strategist on the ground. It's about really understanding the local context, the history, the culture, and then picking the right combination of tools from your toolkit and players for your team. It's all about the mix. And so that leaves us looking to the future. This playbook we've been talking about, it's constantly being rewritten. The challenges we're facing today, things like climate change, AI, global pandemics, they're totally different from the problems of the past. So as we look ahead, the real question is, what's the next great development idea going to be? What new tools and new players will we need to invent to build a better future for everyone?